All right. I wanted to get mic'd up so I can move around a little bit. A lot of slides, and if I'm holding the microphone, I'll end up moving it away from my mouth. So our organization, we call it CSA. It's a nonprofit dedicated to control system cybersecurity. I'll give you a little more context for that. What I'm going to share today is a lot of data. I've erred on the side of sharing quite a bit. Some of this is in some of our reports. These are free. They're PDFs generally, but we do have some hard copies occasionally to show people. But they're free to the world, they're sponsored, so that's how we do the work, and then we can give them to anybody that needs them and can benefit from them. And I'm going to share some data from 3 years of surveys. So we define for our organization, but also for the context of our research, the broadest definition of control systems. We dropped the word industrial years ago to be encompassing with building control systems, medical systems, anything with cyber to physical elements, anything with pumps, valves, actuators, blinking lights, moving parts in the real physical world that are connected and networked. That's in the domain that we're focused on and gathering data on. So we are a nonprofit. We're a 501c6. We were started in Atlanta, Georgia, solely because I live there about 8 years ago, but now it's international in scope, and I'll give you just a sneak peek of what that looks like. But our goal is to recruit more people to the cybersecurity space that's focused on control systems, but also to equip people that are in this space. We have people coming from engineering backgrounds that need more cybersecurity knowledge. We certainly have cybersecurity people that need more engineering or operating technology understanding, and so it's really about building bridges between various parts of the community as well as bringing brand new people in and supporting people professionally. The end result, strengthening our modern connected society. So it started as an experiment, no grand plan, just some discussion groups in a few cities, and today it's grown to over 32,000 people. Joining our sort of top-level community membership has no cost. That's something we committed to at the very beginning. We do continuing education events, live events every week online, and we want everybody to come there that can benefit from them. And so we're growing about 2,000 people a quarter now, and we know that the problem from every evidence that we gather, whether it's surveys or we know that the problem is truly global. There are regional differences in budgets and government programs and regulations, but the problem and people who care about it, it's the same all over the world. So one of our platforms is continuing education, professional development, but the other one is research. We're independent. We don't sell any product. We do have sponsors help us pay for this stuff. We don't allow any of them to have undue influence on our findings. And so we really see ourselves as the ability to take the wisdom of the crowd, sample lots of different stakeholders, make sense of that, and give that back out to the community without any sort of bias. I'm going to share data from our third annual report. KPMG is the title sponsor of that, but supported also by Waterfall and Fortinet and other companies that are contribute to that annual project. That's this report. We're about to release the third annual. I am sharing data from the third annual report that isn't released yet. The data was analyzed over the summer, so I've got some slides showing 3 years of data. That's typically from that research effort. And then we have a new ongoing one that's title sponsored by Radiflow, but supported by Waterfall and Ampere. And it's a deeper dive into security technology choices, satisfaction, some other things that we're trying to measure. If you imagine that the first survey and report is very wide, we ask questions about a lot of different areas, budgets, incidents, human resource problems. The technical one, the one we have currently live today, is very, very deep on the solutions people are purchasing and other questions just about OT cybersecurity solutions. So let's just talk a little bit demographics. People always want to know who's taking, where's all this data coming from. It isn't US-centric. We're really serious about always pushing it out everywhere and making sure that it's representative of as broad a spectrum as we possibly can. Not just geography, but also industry. So a lot of different industries in the survey takers. The primary survey, the longer running one, is over 500 people every year. And it's a highly educated group for the most part. It's weighted a lot towards decision makers. Typically, those are some of the people that can only really take the survey if you're talking about budgets and things like that. But this gives you an idea of sort of who's taking it around the world. So it's roughly 50% North America, 50% US when we look at things plus or minus 5 percentage points. This is important just to understand in context of how we ask some of the questions. We we ask people to self-attest where their OT or ICS cybersecurity program maturity is. So without getting into any discussion of whether or not there are this many level 4 or level 5, highly mature, put that aside. This is where people believe them to be. And I think that's what's important. That's how we interpret it. Not that many people actually are at that level, but that's where they believe them to be. This is what it looks like on a 3-year basis. So you can see there's a curve there, right? Most people are in the lower maturity range, and that matches, anybody working in the space would say, a lot of 1s and 2s out there. And so a little bit of variation between years. The different bar charts here, green is this year. Green is sort of 2023 data. Not any wild swings there, right? And you can see that most people are in that lower part of the maturity curve. And that's important to how we ask some question or share some data as how low maturity and high maturity responders may prioritize or answer a question differently, and they do. We do ask also at the very beginning, if you're a consultant, you get some different questions, so they answer on behalf of their clients and their perception of where their clients are. In this case, this is like the previous chart. It's not very different. The bell curve is fairly similar as far as there's more of the lower maturity. So let's talk about sort of incidents and accidents. It is hard sometimes to ascertain or to know what's caused. There's lots of things that happen in these operating technology environments that go unattributed to a cyber actor. And let's face it, a lot of them are probably not due to a cyber actor. But there's a lot of unknown. And we do get a lot of respondents saying, I don't know, to various questions. That is a state of being right now. There is still a lot of I don't know. But things do happen, things are happening, and some organizations do know that a human being is involved, whether it's an outside party or inside party, we'll get into that. But they do know that there are human beings causing problems in their control networks. This is where we do ask about incidents. We ask this every year, trying to sort of get a barometer of, are you having impactful incidents to your OT, ICS networks? Not any major changes. The group who's confidently saying they had none went dramatically up. Not sure what to mean, to take from that. Having confidence that you've had none is not super likely, but anyway, that went up. But we'll keep checking that every year. So threat actors. This is an important chart. So I do a lot of discussions, and I've been paraphrased incorrectly after I've talked about this chart. Nation states and cyber criminals are absolutely real. I'm not minimizing them. The point that I take from this and from lots of conversations with stakeholders in the industries, across many industries, is if you are low maturity, hardening yourself against a nation state is probably not your next thing you need to work on. Yes, they are a threat actor, and we know there are some sophisticated programs that are in development in many countries. Insiders are the winner. And this pans out every year. You can see it's the winning category. And we have two sets of insiders. If you look at the big winner, it's not malicious insiders. It's negligent insiders. And malicious insiders is in second place. And you put the two together, they far outweigh the other types of threat actors that people are dealing with. So if identity access and management is completely open, if you can fire someone and they can go home and tunnel right back into a manufacturing facility and do over $1 million worth of damage, very real story in my home state of Georgia, that's not sophisticated. That's not some sort of sexy threat actor. That's a low-hanging fruit stuff. I'm not making light of identity access and management work, but nonetheless, if somebody can do that, you probably want to work on those sorts of things and network segmentation. We'll get into some of the prioritization that people look at. So I think this is an important slide to keep people focused. Like, who am I most worried about? And if you're protecting something super, super critical and valuable or dangerous, you do have to worry about all the threat actors. But right now, definitely prioritize your insiders. Attack vectors. This slide's a lot to take in, and so if there's just a quick takeaway, there's a lot of attack vectors, right? You can dive into these, you can look into the particulars of different things. Phishing is still... Well, it looks like it cut off for some reason in the way the slides came this time. So this here is, this is too bad. This is phishing, and this always spawns these interesting conversations where people say, we don't have email clients in our network, so how could we be exposed to phishing in our operating technology environment? If you put aside that there are multiple ways to potentially get from endpoints that have email clients into control environments, depending on the connections, there are email clients in some of these environments. All of my friends and colleagues that do assessments, they're still finding those things. Recently, some very, very expensive example of where this can go wrong would be in the basement of a skyscraper where the PC endpoint had the building control access all through many, many stories, and also had email client on the same PC, for sure. And so that right there is a direct connect, compromised email and direct access to control devices. So in other places, that's harder to do, but it may not be impossible depending on the connections between your business environment and your operating technology environment. So people are still reporting it as a significant issue. Removable media got better. That's one of the ones you can't see. People have made progress on that, right? There's a lot of USB ports where people were plugging and charging in their phones. Those have started to disappear. Some people have closed those off. I remember years ago somebody telling me that they'd put hot glue in all their USB ports. Regardless, we're making progress in that area, and our evidence sort of shows that. This is from the current survey that we haven't concluded and we haven't written the report on, but I just tasked my team to grab a couple things out of the current survey, just interesting. And I thought these were I picked these out of a list of data points that they selected. It's just coincidentally, sort of, they're all near about 50% of the respondents. I don't think there's anything surprising here, but if it is to you, this might be useful. The asset base, lots of legacy equipment. Anybody working in the space knows that's true. A lot of old stuff. There's Windows 3 variants out there still in many places. Lots of XP. That's the state of the union, right? 20 years of technology still in play. Blind spots in the networks. So visibility is a huge term. There are visibility vendors tuned specifically to OT. In the end of the day, even though we're all talking about visibility, most people here, both of these, they're talking about there's a lot of stuff we don't see. That we can't see. So this is very, very recent data that we just pulled together. These next 4 slides, I'm going to breeze through them pretty quickly. It's a lot to take in. What I wanted to share was, and it also, somehow today some of these slides have been cut off. I don't know why. I went through it all this morning. The top part is where they are basically saying these were where there's potential two-directional communication, control, where they can get information out but potentially send information back. The bottom where you see more connectivity, these are respondents saying they have things that are connected to the internet, at least that's their perception. These are where they believe it to be one way, telemetry, getting readings out of a system, and so that you can see. At least that correlates, right? This would be more significant concern where data can go back and make adjustments or changes into the control environment. And here they're saying it's just information out. But what's the overlying concept there? Do you have things connected to the internet? So maybe they're not sure about internet, so we say specifically in a different question, how about just to your business network? And it's sort of the same thing. These are all sorts of things. You can dive into the reports and sort of look at the nuances of HMIs versus PLCs. The only point I'm going to make today on these, accessible by vendor and integrator, that's on the rise. There's certainly more and more third parties saying to do what we do for you, we need to have access, and accessible to the cloud. And there's still people debating this, like whether something should be connected to the cloud, or the negatives of cloud, or fear around cloud. The genie's out of the bottle. I'm not advocating. Sometimes people misinterpret my comments. I'm saying cloud and all these modern, conveniences. That's not my job. I'm just saying it's happening. And I've sat in business briefs by major equipment vendors talking about the data they have in their data lake, and they can take the data from this turbine, they can take data out up to the lake, they can do analytics, they can send data back to the turbine and attenuate or adjust the in-production turbine. And you can say, why would you want to do that? And then they went on to discuss the millions of dollars in savings that they and their clients are making from being able to do that. And right then, the business side of me, which is more my heritage, I've been a cyber entrepreneur for 25 years. I think in business terms more than I do technology. Like, that makes sense. Money speaks, whether we want to or not. And in that presentation, which was a couple years ago, there were cybersecurity people in the hallway going on and about how horrible it was that vendor wanted to, do this this process I just described. I'm like, you're missing the point. It's going to happen. We got to discuss how we're going to architect this, how we're going to do it. There's not much time to be wasted, and we don't want to be talking about whether we should do it. When there's this much money, the business leaders are more or less going to decide to do this. It doesn't mean we can't temper their enthusiasm for this, but these things are major drivers. All right, so what do we have here? Managed control, managed security services, definitely on the rise with OT specificity. You know, MSS, managed security services in traditional IT world, has been going for years, but now we see more and more. I talk to more and more vendors who are building OT or ICS specific managed security services, and we know the high maturity responders, which are green, are adopting it more. And the low maturity responders are reporting that they're planning to adopt it more. And it makes sense. It's very expensive. Again, I'm not selling a service, this is just the data, but it does make sense that there's very expensive to maintain your own SOC that's OT aware, the right people in it, the right tools in it, maybe 24/7. That's a lot of expense. And so you spread that expense across multiple clients. There are very, very large global corporations that do this for themselves, but they're amortizing that cost, I guess, you know, potentially hundreds of locations. But for most companies, potentially having someone else do the monitoring, you know, remotely across the industry, it's definitely being, more and more people are considering that and taking that on. Security technologies. So high maturity responders, again, the green are people that recorded or wrote down that they were a more mature organization. Active intrusion prevention systems, they're you know, quite a bit of a percentage change in adopting that. Firewalls, next-gen firewalls, passive anomaly detection, you just see the green. So it makes sense though, higher maturity responders probably also correlates to bigger budgets. So I don't think that any of these slides or any of our reports, I'm very cautious about saying, see what the high maturity responders are doing, you all should do that too. That's way too simplistic. There are probably some very, very large budgets, and some organizations, many, do not have that. So it's still always about prioritization. You can't do it all, but it's indicative, it's interesting to see what are more mature organizations doing, where are they placing their bets, where are they making their investments. I think that's not without, you know, value in understanding that, but it's not prescriptive. Do all these things they're doing. You may not have the money for it, you're going to have to make tougher choices. Oh, yeah, down at the bottom, we are seeing a rise in unidirectional gateway and data diodes. If you're not familiar with that, there are now a handful of vendors that's their specialty. That's hardware typically that allows one-way communication. So if you talk about data needing to get out, but not needing to get back, lots of application between the business side and the operation side. There are technologies that you can put in place in some of those segments and just say, it's impossible. And literally that is the claim of these vendors, and I think it's backable. They're designed to not go the other direction. So it is data out, and not getting into technically how they do it. You can ask them, but that is also, we see more and more of that. Oops, I'm going backwards. Okay, so people ask, this is from the current survey, but people ask, and so I wanted to add it real quick, you know, what standards are people mapping to? So you can see here that the NIST 800-53 and the IEC 62443 are the large ones at the bottom. We're also seeing varieties branching off of that. So there's taking, let's say, 62443 and saying, you know what, it doesn't quite work as it's written for Rails, but let's use it as inspiration, use a lot of it for inspiration to make a Rails specific one. So there's efforts in Europe going on like that. So these are, even if someone's building something new, they're often inspired or directly derivative of some of the longer standing set of standards that are out there. So greatest risk to reducing control system cybersecurity attack surfaces. I'm sorry, so many of these slides are cut off. I don't understand why that happened. I've never seen this, but it reduces some of your ability to understand this. So control system expertise, this one here, the largest one, it's still cited a lot of places. That's certainly part of our workforce development work. We would concur with that. It's, you know, we know in cybersecurity in general, we're missing anywhere between 1 and 3 million trained individuals globally, depending on what report you read. So if you look at cybersecurity for control systems, or OT specifically, the problem's even worse. You're looking for cross-domain knowledge, and that limits the field even more. So that's not a big surprise, but there are some other ones. You can see them in the reports, a lot more useful than this, where half the sentences are cut off. But yeah, sorry about that. This is sort of looking ahead. If you had the extra resources, where would you put it? And the winner there was protecting continuous operations. That's a great example, again, where a lot of IT and cyber folks don't necessarily have the background understanding. They can think in terms of confidentiality. The CIA model, it doesn't apply to these environments. This, staying up, business executives and operations folks and plant managers, they know this cold. Every second, minute that they're down, they know the cost of that. Anybody doing cyber work had better understand that. That is critical understanding, and it's a big blunder for anybody who is doing work with their counterparts in operating technology. When you go in there, if you don't understand the business, that's the number one thing I hear everywhere, is just learn how we make money and how we operate. We cannot implement security for security's sake. We have to implement security that is absolutely supportive of what our mission is and what we do. And that mistake is made at all levels of the organization. There are even CISOs going into their first, newly appointed CISOs going into board meetings, and I have a particular story that it was related to me and how ugly it was, being cut off in the middle of their presentation by a board member. Do you have any idea how we make money here and what our business is? And I don't know what they were presenting, but the context was without awareness of what the overall business mission was. Top return on investments. Network segmentation's a winner. With high maturity responders already doing a lot of it, low maturity responders saying they're planning it, that's usually considered a low-level thing. Threat intelligence is probably not everybody's cup of tea, or maybe not what you're doing if you haven't solved for network segmentation, breaking things apart. If you're not in the space directly, it's just saying, instead of compromising all of this, what if somebody gets in who shouldn't, but because we've segmented it, we've just compromised this part, not all of this. So that's an oversimplification, but that's the sense of it, right? Let's break the segments down and let's limit our exposure and our risk. Instead of flat networks, there's still lots and lots and lots of flat networks, meaning there's no DMZ, there's no difference between this part of the network and this part of the network and the business network. They're all connected. That's got to go away. And people are working on it everywhere to various and lesser degrees. This is interesting down here at the very bottom, improving communications between IT and corporate teams. I've already indicated a little bit on that, right? I may need a reminder on my timing. Okay, great. This is a big area, again, communications. So people, process, and technology, what is the number one area where we've got to make improvement if we're going to solve this problem or move the needle? It's people. It's not process and technology. All three matter. You have to have all three, quotients of people, process, and technology. The people problems, they're significant. Don't have enough people, that's empty seats. But even the people we have, there's still dysfunction, there's still disagreement and distrust in some companies between different stakeholders. And that's where we've got a lot of work to do. And so clearly, understanding your counterpart's business. And so I have interviewed hundreds of people at this point for my podcasts, for our podcast, where we just had our 99th episode. A theme comes out all the time from the people that are getting this done. It's like, I grab donuts or bagels and I go over to the plant on my off time or my lunch time, and I get to know them, or we do offsites. We're building trust between these parties. We're not going in and saying, comply. And so this area here is huge. And the only reason the low maturity responders are rating it higher than the high, I guess the high maturity responders are making progress in this area. That's our interpretation. But the low maturity responders, that's the one where they reported more need to work on the collaboration. But everybody needs to work on that. And the future teams will be these hybrid teams and trusted teams. There are absolute discipline differences. So I'm not saying, hey, let's push everything together. It's all under one team. No, but there's got to be way more bridges built between people. Network segmentation. So this is from the current survey. So I just shared you the 3-year running survey. Network segmentation is very popular. Well, we asked people, where are you on it? So this is the survey that's running right now that we really, really want asset owners to take. We want another 50 to 100 people to take it. So if you are an asset owner operator, please talk to me afterwards. We'd love for you to take it. It's anonymous. We don't collect any information about who you are. But this is where we actually are. So network segmentation is a high priority, but we're only a third are saying we're there. We're pretty mature. We got it all done. Most people, 75% to 100, 50%, 25%, or we're really nowhere on it. So you can see it falls off real quick off of the people that are saying, the third that are saying we've got this pretty well in hand. So that's low-hanging fruit. Got to work on network segmentation for sure. Asset discovery, maybe even before that. So people say, well, what are the first things I should work on? Network segmentation is one thing. The other thing, I boil it down to what stuff is on our network. The things that we believe should be there, our company bought those things, and the things that are on it, every assessor I know says the things that are on it that we did not buy. We don't even know where those came from. They came probably from employees, but there's other things on these networks. Where is all the stuff and how is it communicating? That's also considered pretty primordial. Everybody should be getting there the best they can. Again, there are higher and higher, more exotic things that people can do, especially if you want to harden yourself even more for nation states. And right now at the bottom, know where your stuff is, know how it's communicating, and start separating the segments. Budgets. This is, I don't really know how to interpret this yet. We're asking every year, is your budget increasing, decreasing? What we see here is a decrease to large increases, if that makes sense. The larger increases, greater than 50%, or increase of more than 30% went down. So it could be that there were bigger expenditures over in recent years. I know in one industry vertical, in energy, there were some really big purchases some years ago, and so maybe they've come down from that. Moderate increase is still on, less than 10% is still increasing. So it's not like we're decreasing budgets, I don't think, but it looks like there was a little bit of a pullback. That also could be economic. I know from vendors, certainly in the United States that I'm intimate with, there is some behavior of, we're going to put this purchase off, with their customers. We're going to put this purchase off a little longer. It is happening right now. Longer sales cycle. We're going to push this purchase into the next year, and so that could be just recessionary pressures or overall economic pressures. This is where we really love the multi-year data. Is we'll just keep tracking every year and say what are the long-term trends, and maybe we can make sense of it over more years of data. But this is where we are on 3 years of data so far. What are you going to implement? What element will you invest the most in during the coming year? So we're looking at budgets, and so those are slightly increasing still. But where are you going to put that money? Asset inventory and management. It's big. That's what I was talking about earlier. Where's all the stuff? Where is it? What's connected? What's communicating? That's huge. Network segmentation, you can see the low maturity responders are planning to do quite a bit more investment in that. And that's solely a reflection of that the high maturity responders have already done a lot of that. It's not a low priority for them. They're further along in that process. Threat detection, not surprising. That's more the purview of the higher maturity ones. And I think it's a case of that's a higher level thing to be working on. If your budget is constrained, it's probably not where you should be starting. Some people might disagree with that who are selling that service, but that's my opinion. This is from the current survey as well. We're starting to ask questions, not only what technology, cybersecurity technologies are you purchasing, but we want to start to get carefully into sort of how satisfied, how happy. It's one thing to buy a product, but there's the total cost of ownership. If I buy it, but then I have to implement it, I have to staff it, run it, and there's some greater cost beyond the purchase price of a product. So I think the big example here, or the big takeaway here, is do your diligence. If you are in the buyer seat, or you're influencing the buying of security technologies for the OT environment, do your diligence on the total cost. Now these are reported categories where people are saying that the cost after we bought it was a lot more than we thought it was going to be. And that's something that I hear a lot from places like, oh, we bought this, but man, making it work was a lot more time, money, and effort than we had hoped. So you just got to ask that full spectrum and say, we're really excited about this, but we really need to understand and project what it's going to cost to really make this thing work in the environment. And that one I can relate to. I had a security product as a co-founder early in this space 13 years ago, and I realized in the first couple of years of attempting to sell it much too early in the OT cyberspace, we could have given it to a lot of customers, and they couldn't have done anything with it. It's not a good thing for any company to recognize that. The space is getting more mature, there are more people, but that's part of the equation. If you have a really, really cool tool, but you're selling it to a customer that can't implement it, not a good use of either of your time. So I'm getting ready to wrap up. Where are we today? So not that long ago, there weren't OT cyber programs and there weren't OT cyber sophisticated people, not many. Certainly you don't have to go back very far to find very few people talking about it. I crossed into this space in 2010 and it was a lot more nascent than it is now. We've made a lot of progress, still a lot to go. We're somewhere in the middle now. Vulnerabilities, threats, and incidents specific to OT and control systems, they're clearly going up each year. There's no destination where we're safe or we're secure or we've made it, right? There's no such place. We're going to get to this place I'm calling acceptable managed risk. Here you have a sophisticated process for measuring risk and for quantifying it, and you make trade-offs and choices. That is where the sophisticated parties are all going to be. Some are already there or they're getting there because you cannot do it all. And it's a constantly change of state, right? We're not arriving because we're also working with something where the attack surfaces are multiplying, all the use cases of all this connected technology is multiplying. So we're not going to arrive at a destination. We're going to get to a place where we say we manage the risk best we can and we do it on a prioritized basis. What are some of the elements that we've got to put in place? Leadership buy-in. There are great efforts in so many companies I've talked to at all kinds of different levels. Lower level enthusiasm, excitement, and we're going to fix this is often very frustrated if it's misaligned with the senior level. Let's face it, a lot of things are empowered by trickling down by boards and executives and C-level people that are executive team members that are saying we get it and we're going to have to invest in this. That moves the needle. So I'm applauding everybody at every level, but I do know frustrated people because they want to make a difference, but they do not have. They sense that they don't have quite the level of buy-in that they would like. And that's putting it lightly. In some organizations, they feel like it's not being taken seriously at all. In others, it's being taken seriously, but not much money being allocated to it. I have a whole theory on this. I think we've adopted and are adopting all this connectivity, and the business owners, managers, shareholders have loved the efficiency and the savings and the benefits. So I'm making these numbers up, but let's say we've saved over the last 20 years of making all this connectivity, we've saved 30%. I would say we just haven't paid the cybersecurity tax. We've only saved 15%. We should have been investing more. If we want to realize these benefits, there's always been a cost. Now we have to pay it retroactively. So I think we've loved the benefits, we've embraced them wholesale. It's just we haven't really paid the price yet. So it's just a price that's arriving now by connecting all this stuff early on at least, without security architecture, without secure by design, without really a lot of forethought. It's getting better, but we got to pay the price now. Understanding risks, this gets back to that. So it really is, risk is the watchword. All the coaching I've done with anybody that is trying to influence senior levels, it's like talking in terms of risk and risk management. Risk is understood by a lot of corporate executives. They already have risk portfolios, they might have chief risk officers. There's other risks that they're quite comfortable and have for years been willing to have as part of their planning process. Hurricanes and storms and insurance to lay off some of that risk, all these sorts of things. This is a new risk bucket, new-ish, and some of them aren't as comfortable with how to do that. So if you're going to be making presentations or trying to influence, it's in talks in terms of risk, and risk is, there's some nice mathematical equations and methodologies evolving. It's not just, this would be really bad if it happened. How likely is it to happen? It's a mathematical equation. What's the impact, likelihood? So there's a FAIR model, F-A-I-R, and there's some other companies out there starting to really focus on, we can't do it all, so we better get more and more sophisticated on how we rank these risks, and then we can have honest business level discussions around risk and acceptable risk, because that is what happens in the real world. Some risks are accepted. We're gonna not mitigate this risk. We're gonna accept it, or we're gonna have some insurance to maybe help us if something happens in that area. But here's something that has a moderate to high likelihood and a huge impact. That's probably something we should do. But if it's exotic, meaning, oh man, this would be so devastating if this happened, but you have to have all of these elements all have to align for that. That's low likelihood, high impact. That might not be the first thing we work on. Even though the scenario is quite dark, its likelihood is very, very, very unlikely. That's the process that we have to go through. We have to start thinking in terms of mathematics, weighting, and equation. Build trust across the organization. I talked about that earlier. Build trust across the organization. It's key to all this stuff. Okay, it's common to all these elements is that we need more of that, not less of that, and that's human beings working with other human beings. That is not natural for some people, but it's build empathy for the other stakeholder. Respect that they're bringing something to the table. Go learn what that is. There's still a lot of opposition. It's amazing inside a company, let alone inside an industry or inside a country. I mean, as you start to subdivide it, if you go all the way into one company, we work for the same company, and total disagreement, ranging from real dysfunction to just, you know what, just stay over there, we'll manage this over here. Not that long ago, I was in a meeting with the CEO and the CISO of a very large company that people would recognize, and the CEO did not know the CISO did not have responsibility for cybersecurity in the plants. Like, oh, nope. We stop right at the plant, we do not touch that. And I knew the secret there, he didn't say, we're not welcome to touch that. And I'm not advocating here that all CISOs should have all responsibility, that's complicated. But that was not even known at a huge company, that there were those lines of demarcation. That's your network, this is my network, lots and lots of opportunity for problems, the way we patch all this stuff together. It's going to take time, but we've got to get better at building these bridges. Prioritized action plan, that's what I was talking about earlier. We can't do it all, so there's also methodologies. If you do the weighting, if you understand your risks, and you understand the likelihood, and you start to be able to rank those risks, then that's a great precursor to prioritization. And that's where everybody's head's got to be. It's like, okay, we can't do all of this, but here's what we're going to do. And here's why, especially when presenting this, here's why we're doing this one now. We've done our homework, and we're doing it now because of these factors. That's why we're doing it. Not, we're doing it because everybody's talking about this new solution and we should have it too. And there is some of that. That's not a defendable methodology. But here are the risk factors, here's the likelihood, here's the impact, here's what, a risk that our company has to lay off, we have to mitigate, and here's our plan to mitigate it. Those sorts of methodologies, discussion points, using that increases success for sure for getting budget and getting buy-in. And be ready to respond. Incident response is still quite reactive, and all evidence shows that practice, rehearsal, tabletopping, all these things pay huge dividends. If you are trying to get the team to function and get all the stakeholders together while you're having an incident, it's too late. And there's lots and lots of evidence and some case studies on this where people have made mistakes or could have mitigated some of the damage of their incident if they'd all been coordinated properly. That takes rehearsal. That's something, I have a military background, and that's something that we did is practice, rehearse, practice till we were sick of practicing at fire drills and emergency drills and all these sorts of things. But at the end of the day, when something happens, all that kicks in. You're not trying to think through what should we do. It's instinctive and everybody knows their role and part. That is earned, and that's earned through work in advance. And I've heard some great examples lately of inviting senior executives to observe portions of tabletop exercises or CTFs, capture the flag exercises, and they come away with a great amount of awareness. Sometimes they're given a job, so you have to tailor it sometimes. It's not going to be there all day. Maybe they're not going to be part of everything. So you think about, what am I inviting them to? Be surgical about it. But you can invite them to a particular thing and say, hey, you're going to sit in this role or shadow this person. And they have decided when they walk away, like, wow, okay, that's how this would all play out. They do not, being a big collective term, some executives do know about what's working. But if you get outside of cybersecurity and into other executive branches, it can be a huge drop-off in really understanding what happens in the case of an incident. So there's a lot to be done there that is going to really benefit people when something happens. So the last two slides that I want to share are people that are selling product into the space. This just got made in the last 24 hours. I'm not really prepared I'm not going to read all this, but the next two slides are we asked basically all the end users, because our current live survey is really focused on asset owners. We said, what can the security vendors do better? And this one is, what do you wish they all knew? And the red one, I highlighted that in red because I've already mentioned it. I wish they understood our business. So if you are selling security products and services, you will do nothing but benefit yourself by studying more. There's still vendors, and I used to be one, still vendors going in, and they love their baby, their product, and they just want to sell it. It's not always appropriate to sell it. You'll build a lot of trust if you get to that quickly. Salespeople are like, I'm going to just sell it anyway. It's alienating. I mean, I know that may be a technique that works for some. I think it largely backfires. So if you can assess that that's not where they are, maturity, what your product does for them, the people they may need to be able to do it, you may get a future sale for them if you have the long view anyway, by just cutting to the chase and getting to that and saying, you know what, it looks like you may not be ready for this, but maybe I can help you in this way or help you in that way, or we can do some consulting and you can be ready for it at a future date. I mean, there may be ways to keep your toe in there and keep a relationship going, but it's not going to always be appropriate. And there's some stuff that's never going to be appropriate. So understand their business, understand their maturity in cybersecurity and where they are, and then the more you do that, the more you can really fine tune your sales pitch or your consultative process, which is really what it should be versus just selling. So this is interesting. Holistic solutions. I just came from another show, 2 shows in the last 2 weeks, and there was a vendor I'd never heard of, and the rhetoric at the booth was, we solve it all. I don't think he said the word silver bullet, but that's certainly what it felt like. But we solve it all. In fact, you don't need to worry about segmentation and some other stuff if you implement this, which, by the way, has a component that needs to go on all the endpoints in the operating environment. So right there, I think this is a person that does not know what they're talking about, but they're selling product into this space. There's going to be more and more of that. IT vendors, IT products being morphed or modified or successfully or not to work in the OT environment. Learn the language. If you're in that category, if you're merging into the OT space, learn the language, learn the constraints. It's not going to be all appropriate, and there's probably no silver bullet. I think in theory there isn't. So it's going to be about really saying, this is what we can do. Again, if you understand risk, and you're talking in terms of language of risk, especially if you're talking to senior buyers, and you say, this is a risk, this is a high risk for an organization like yourself, here's some case studies, here's some examples. And so this is happening, and here's the financial impact to your organization. We can decrease or eliminate that particular risk for you, and look at cost versus the cost that you're exposed to, because we did a little homework. You've got 50 plants, so this is what you do annually from what we can tell. Here's your exposure. That's gold. That's mature approach. So last, it's sort of similar to this as well. What practice or approach do you wish cybersecurity technology providers would stop doing? One size fits all, buzzwords, zero trust in AI. You've got to be careful with all that. It doesn't mean we're not, in some cases, going to use artificial intelligence. It's certainly seeping its way into lots of things, but be very, very cautious about the buzzwords. It's certainly alienating a lot of end user, purchaser, asset owner, operator purchasers. Bring it up when it's appropriate, but not at the front end as you're going to get the business if you list out the following 5 special terms. So things like that. Feel free to reach out, connect to me on LinkedIn if I or CSA can be of service to you in some way. We're always doing research, always looking for new partners. Would love to have some more asset owner operators take our current live survey. Again, it's anonymous. We don't want to know who you are. We just want to know what you think. Thank you very much.